fascinating topic today. You just heard the introductions of our speakers, so I'm actually going to skip my introductions of the speakers, and we're going to talk about the bottom line of a very important topic: the actual battle networks for warfighting. Because the department's new, emerging, soon-to-be finalized joint warfighting concept makes clear that GEOINT will be foundational to the battle management system for all domain operations. This is a new paradigm that senior leaders of DoD have referred to as the Internet of Military Things, relying on assured PNT, protected SATCOM, globally dispersed multispectral ISR sensors, autonomous systems communicating and queuing each other at machine-to-machine speed. That's daunting. In a speech this summer, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Hyten, said, quote, "The simple requirement for JADC2 will be, from that day forward, all data produced by the DoD, all data produced by every weapon system in the Department of Defense will be accessible, period. There is no other alternative." So with that small challenge, let's get started around the horn here with this distinguished panel with some questions for each of you, and then we'll open up to audience questions as well shortly, and you'll see on the screen how to do that if you're not familiar with it from yesterday. I would like to hear from each of you how you see the role of JADC2 from your perspective and all domain operations relating to the Secretary of Defense's emerging doctrine of what he and now the department and the national security leadership are referring to as integrated deterrence. Each can answer. Fly can answer.
It's not a drone.
Pence went through it. Each can answer. We're going to start with Mark Andrus, the NGA CIO.
Great. Louis, thanks. USGIF, thank you so much. This is an important topic, and I'm really honored to be here with such a great panel. So when he asked us to think about that, the integrated deterrence dialogue going on, it was interesting to me from really two aspects. The first was seeing Secretary Austin in Asia talking about China. And in the backdrop, you have the HMS Queen Elizabeth steaming through the South China Sea with embarked Marines and Joint Strike Fighters. Right, so that his first message was really about partnerships, right? Kind of what Dr. Scalise was saying. We're not only good friends, we're good. How's it go, boss? We not only have good friends, we have friends that are really good. So that was the big one. The second one was he talked about the mixing together of technology, operating concepts, and technology, operating concepts, and capabilities in a networked way, right? So if you think about partnerships and combining technology capabilities and new operating concepts in a networked way, you get pretty excited. Basically, if you walk down the halls of this GEOINT, it's just all over the place. That's what our GEOINT community's really postured to bring to this fight today. Second thing is just looking at the future and talking about what GEOINT can bring to this JADC2 and this operating concept. I was hanging out on Tuesday at one of the mixers on the patio over there at the ballpark, and I meet a young man named Josh. Josh is an intel analyst, St. Louis local, served in the Marine Corps, and I go up, meet Josh, and say, "Hey, I'm Mark. Hey, I'm Josh." He goes, "You're going to be on that panel on Thursday on JADC2." I said, "Yes, I am." He goes, "That's really important topic. It's really important. What are you going to say?" I said, "Well, Josh, it's Tuesday, and the panel's not till Thursday. I don't know what I'm going to say." "What do you want me to say, Josh?" So what happened after that was about 20 minutes of intense dialogue about what needs to happen from this community. I'll try to capture a little bit of it, but it was about the entire breadth of what the GEOINT community can bring to the fight, the opportunity, that built up potential energy of all these sensors that are coming, of the AI and ML things we've been talking about, of the data strategy around it. That was number one, but that's not all. It was about taking pixels and turning pixels into tracks at machine speed and getting it into these warfighting systems that the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, that they're bringing to the fight. But he didn't stop there. He wanted to talk about the foundational GEOINT aspects and the need to go from 2D to 3D and multidimensional, right? 3D, change detection, into the battle space real time to give those Marines an advantage. But he said that's not enough either, because this is integrated deterrence, and we've got to use our analytic processes, modernize those so that we can give leadership and combatant commanders insight into where China is moving so that we can move ahead of them. He went on, but I was just sitting there going, I wasn't this insightful at his age, but I thought it really captured what GEOINT can do. And I don't know, Josh, you out there? Is that about it? Did I miss anything? Okay, thumbs up from Josh. Well, there you go.
Very good, thanks, Mark. Dan?
As we were talking about this, Louis, I started to think about the enormity of the problem, not just from the data connectivity and systems talking to systems, but the massive amounts of data that need to flow through those systems in real time or near real time, and then be geo-referenced to locations, geo-referenced to situational awareness for lots of things that are moving at really fast speeds across battlefield and theater scenarios. And then how you take that information and make it compatible with the machine learning algorithms that we want to do, again at speed, so that you don't get an answer a week from now, but that you get the answers at the time that the intelligence community, the battlefield commanders, the people that need to make decisions need to make them. So I think there's this massive amount of work that is being done and that needs to be done to bring that in a comprehensive way so that you can get the all the way from space-based applications, all the way through air breathers, everything else that's situationally interesting to what the battlefield commanders and the intelligence community need to help make decisions to counter what's going to happen. And so it's not just the systems talking to systems, but the data compatibility, the standards that need to be set, the different types of all the ints that go into that, and then geospatially referenced to make sense for someone that has to make those decisions. Because if you just get a flood of data and it looks like lots and lots of stuff scrolling down screens and you can't make heads or tails of it, that's not helpful to anybody. So it has to start getting locked into a reference frame. The algorithms need to start pulling apart the information that's there. And then whether it's a sensor to shooter application or an early warning and indication or whatever it is you're looking for, being able to pull that out of those massive amounts of data, because we're not wired to just deal with massive amounts of data. We're wired to try and make sense of that data in a way that we're trying to solve an ultimate problem, to keep something from happening, to have a deterrent, or to, if the deterrents aren't working anymore, to be able to prosecute an action. And so I'm really excited about it. I think it's much more daunting than maybe some of us have thought a little bit. But the most important thing is that we're moving out on it, that the doctrines are being established, that the reference standards are being set, that the technology is keeping up, and that we have to, it's an imperative. This can't be a 2030, a 2035, or a 2045 type activity. This is a 2021 and a 2022 activity. And so trying it, failing fast, and moving the advancing technology and doctrines forward. I'm really excited about this. I think it's a very ripe time as these technologies come together. Cloud applications, machine learning, spinning GPUs up in the cloud, and the immense amounts of data that are becoming available from all these different sources as we work our way through that. So exciting time. I'm really fun to talk about this today.
Thanks very much, Dan. Lauren.
All right. So I think we all agree, daunting. Great vision, absolutely the way we need to fight in the future. And the way that I look at it is it's combining tech convergence, enabling our digital talent to be able to fight in a new world, and coming up with completely different ways of warfighting and doing it together not just across services and with our industry partners, but also with our coalition partners. And I think actually within the military and the intelligence community, we're pretty good at bringing those folks into the fight. Now, I kind of see this as almost like a big capstone project where we all are at different places on our journey and we all have different things we have to do to prepare. But ultimately, that's when we get that game-changing impact, is when we've all done those things that we need to do to prepare and we can bring them to that joint fight. And I'll just share, I mean, some of these things are very simple, things that in the commercial world are just normal. So just a few years ago, famously, we had Eric Schmidt out to our Air Operations Center at Al Udeid in Qatar, and the commander was telling him, hey, you know, the worst thing that could happen out here is that someone would erase my whiteboard. And Eric Schmidt was like, what? He said, well, this is where we plan all of our in-air refueling ops. You know, and they're like, yeah, we got a guy kind of hanging out the back of an airplane, 400 miles an hour, fueling midair, and then they go back to the fight. And Eric Schmidt says, come on now, there should be an app for that. And a few months later, there was. And we're still saving something like $500,000 a week in fuel because the algorithm is more efficient for us. But we need to do that with more of our missions. Sometimes it is just about software. Sometimes it's about getting data from anywhere to anywhere. And I think at this point, we're actually pretty good at solving just about any problem. You know, you could say, hey, I need to do X. I have this really hard problem to solve, and probably 9 months later, we could get a team together, we could solve it. But I think one of the goals of JADC2 is we don't have 9 months. We need to be ready to solve any problem right now. And that means not just solving it once and doing an MVP, it means doing it at scale and being able to do it at scale again every time. And so I think we've done a good job as a community on some of our data efforts. Loved seeing the data strategy roll out yesterday in Admiral Sharp's keynote. But there are a lot of things that we have to do globally with infrastructure. Being able to leverage global cloud infrastructure, being in one environment where we can fight with our coalition partners, with our industry partners, with our joint partners, with our intelligence community, you know, that's huge. And so a lot of the things, one of the exciting things across the Department of Defense, I guess all the Zero Trust fans in the audience will be excited that we're all in alignment on this. You know, we have everybody working toward things like identity and data tagging, which sounds super boring to the non-technical audience, but they are key in knowing exactly who gets access to what data and ensuring the speed of that data to be used for each and every mission. Now, we were talking earlier about the use, where does GEOINT fit into this as well? And for us, there are a couple places, but we need to make sure that we're hitting the right target. That's huge. Being able to get that target information automatically, and believe it or not, sometimes it's automatic today, and sometimes you literally have someone grabbing it from here. There's a sticky note. They swivel this way, they type it here, and then they type it here, and the only repeatable process was that they reused the sticky note. You know, so getting rid of that type of swivel chair apps is huge. Doing it across all levels of classification is huge as well. The other piece, making sure that we hit a target. And knowing that that target is actually taken out, that it hasn't moved. And then humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery is such a huge capstone. And I think that's one that everyone cares a lot about too. How do we get that data if there's a disaster, someone is lost at sea? How can we find literally a needle in a haystack? We have many people that we need to rescue after a hurricane or a tsunami. How do we figure out which assets can go and make that rescue? And how do we make sure that we're also able to communicate with folks and to work across all of the services? That's a huge part of our Air Force mission. And I know we have some really great partnerships going on across government. But I'll pass it over to Kelly, one of our strong partners.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. So I guess I will give you the Navy perspective of JADC2 and really where we see the benefit and the opportunity for us. So if you think about joint warfighting concept, the concept that we need to be able to fight jointly with our partners, with our services, not in stovepipes. There's technical challenges, but there's also cultural challenges with getting to that place. Specifically for the Navy, I would say we have a microcosm of that. We are operating forward, and we have known for a while as technology has been changing that we need to leverage space, we need to leverage cyber, But the idea with the joint warfighting concepts is that we are synchronizing our actions across the services. Within the Navy, we have to synchronize our actions across our ships, our subs, and the aviation community. And it is no longer about one single target. It is about a massive amount of targets at scale, all moving in time. And so the ability to be able to ingest that data, and for the Navy specifically, we're operating far forward, largely dispersed. And so we need to be able to have resilient, adaptable networks and decision support tools that reside locally so that we can fuse data at the tactical edge on our ships, on our aircraft, but ingest data when it is available, when we're outside of contested conditions. Having that leverage of what GEOINT brings, but having it at the tactical edge and being able to disconnect sometimes, as the Navy will need to disconnect, but then reconnect and build on all the unified data that this community is putting together. So to me, it is, in the Navy, we are focused specifically on upgrading our networks and getting the right decision support tools. And foundational to that is having trusted data sources and the ability to have modern software practices where we can take the opportunity of all the potential energy that exists out there with our new sensing capability, turn those into decision support tools that our warfighters can use now. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, you're not going to stop completely, because now I'm going to ask, we're going to start with you, Kelly. I can imagine Secretary Austin, having heard that, would say, this is fantastic in terms of what we're going to be doing. We're all in alignment. That's wonderful. Now tell me how you're going to be doing it. So if, from the services perspective, I'll ask Kelly and then Lauren, how would you assess your services' ability to manage the alignment of requirements and funding to make JADC2 real? There's no joint program office. Kelly, if you read her bio, the impressive bio, it includes, you've lived this movie before. You were the chief engineer of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which was an exercise in alignment of jointness. So how's that going from the service perspective of the Navy?
Okay, sure. So within the Navy, we have an effort called Project Overmatch, and it is really our project that we have aligned to the JADC2 effort. So my office, we skipped the intro, so I will speak a little bit about where I live, because I think it's important. I live, my position is to really bring digital transformation and digital integration across the Navy, and specifically across two communities. So N9 is our community of operators, warfighters. They are generally platform-centric guys and gals. And then our N2, N6 community is the intel and the comms group. And so I live in, I have two bosses, two 3-star bosses, where I report to both of them. And the objective of my office is really to make the naval operational architecture real, with the right requirements and the right coordinated funding that aligns with the capabilities that we need to bring in terms of Project Overmatch. And so I touched on it. We're really focused on getting adaptable networks and networks that are resilient. We have many ways to get information to the ships or to the aircraft, and as well as the decision support tools that are needed to really support the warfighter. As we open up our pipes and we provide more flexibility, we've learned through coordination with aviation and surface ships that you need to be given the warfighters tools in the ship and in the aircraft, where they can see a common operating picture and preferably a common targeting picture, where you have weapons quality TARC, you have quality data, and you have ID, so that you can coordinate and, quite honestly, not waste your weapons. So what we are specifically focused on, Doug Small is the direct reporting program manager, has been named It's CNO's #2 priority, only behind nuclear deterrence. And he is charged with developing the networks as well as the tools and analytics. And he's standing up a DevSecOps environment so that we can build common services and better connect our disparate platforms within the Navy. I should also mention I am the JADC2 rep for the Navy. And so we're doing this in coordination with Air Force and with the other services, Army, so that at the tactical level, and this is where we're starting, because the problem is so huge, where do you start? And right now, we are starting with our platforms at the tactical edge and being able to communicate in contested environments in a way that's more resilient than what we have today. As JADC2 matures, there's all kinds of opportunities to connect ourselves and make sure we're in alignment, and we'll continue to refine as JADC2 continues to mature.
Lauren, we didn't have room for an Army representative on the stage today, but the Army, you used the word convergence a minute ago, and in this context, that's the title of the Army's equivalent of Overmatch, Project Convergence. Air Force really was out front of all the services with ABMS for JADC2. So what's the status report from the service perspective on this joint alignment?
So I think we're actually working together better than we ever have. We even joke that we have a CIO support group across all of the services. I think we're going to pull Mark into that. But we talk a lot across services, and we are trying to drive more of an enterprise. And part of that is for resource reasons, and part of that is because it's the right thing to do. If you're going to get data from anywhere to anywhere, if you're going to share software, if you're going to share just C2 and operational awareness, there's a lot of work that we can do to become that enterprise. And so at the strategic level within the Air Force, we are focused on things that'll drive that rock solid digital foundation, on things that'll drive user experience for warfighter effect, anything that will enable our digital talent, whether that is the way that we manage and place our workforce, and on things that'll also drive trade space. And in general, across the department, we have a lot of stovepipes. And a lot of times those stovepipes, it's old tech. You have server that's kind of falling apart, and you probably break the environment every time you try to push new software. And so as a service and as a department, we are trying to drive a lot of a common ground there. And so with ABMS, it really is, again, that capstone effort where we're looking at new platforms, smaller platforms. Anyone that hasn't read the book, The Kill Chain by Chris Brose, I would definitely recommend a read. And actually, we're doing some partnership with Anduril as well. But really, I'd say that there's a lot of work to do in a lot of those foundational areas, and so we're starting there, and we're doing it together, and also doing things like collaborating on Platform One. Although we have Party Bus, the Navy has the Party Barge, so everybody brings their spin to it. But just I think the collaboration is awesome, and actually I'm really excited about some future collaboration with Mark and bringing our IC partners in a little bit more closely, because the GEOINT piece is really important, and I think that we have some work to do on some of that cross-domain work and data interfaces between military and the IC. So that's very exciting.
That's great. And Dan, let me ask a kind of industry variant on that question. We've heard all week from government leaders in the GEOINT world that this new era, the GEOINT world has definitively shifted towards dynamic services, not static products, and architectures that can support unanticipated uses and demands in real time. So how is industry shifting to support that in its business models from your perspective?
I think probably one of the best ways to demonstrate that would be to give a real-world example. So this week, actually today, in fact, the 18th Airborne Corps and Lieutenant General Kurilla are running their Scarlet Dragon version 4 exercises down at Fort Bragg. And they have, in a very innovative way, taken capabilities that NGA has developed, that NRO has developed and procured, and that the Army and others have been working on, and the Air Force and the Navy are there as well, to solve a problem in a real-time scenario. So they're taking space-based assets, they're doing broad area surveillance, they're getting that data down to the ground, they're putting it into AI and machine learning algorithm-ready data sets. They're finding targets, they're geopositioning those targets, they're locking them down into a targeting solution, and then they're link 16ing that back up to F-35s on cap and to HIMARS systems that can do long-range precision fires. And they're doing live fire exercises today. So I think it's really exciting that you think about a real-world application where it's bringing in the geointelligence, the capabilities that the NGA and the artificial intelligence and machine learning analysis they've been working on, NRO-provided space assets or industry-type capabilities, and bringing that into a real-world scenario to solve problems inside of a battle space, inside the timelines that make sense to a commander. And that's huge. Like, that's not science fiction, right? That's happening today. So, it's not operationalized for full, theater operations yet, but it's a proof point that this can be done. This can be done on the timelines that it needs to be done on, and that the things that we're bringing to the table in terms of the tools and capabilities are working. So, as an industry representative up here on the panel today, we're really excited about helping all of our mission partners achieve those objectives and those timelines. And speaking on behalf of everybody that's here with all the booths and everything else this week, there's an awful lot of ferment going on that's being driven in the technologies and the development to be able to solve those problems. We're really excited. That's
great, thank you. We've gotten a ton of audience questions already, so I'm going to ask just one more of my own. Mark, we heard yesterday from NGA Director, your boss, Admiral Sharp, and he not only released the data strategy, which I went home and downloaded and read last night, but I had the hard copy of the tech focus areas, which I highly recommend. I think everybody got a copy. Thanks, USGIF. It lays out the moonshot priorities, the mission imperatives. I was struck by just how aligned these are for JADC2 specifically. The assured PNT&T, the accelerated tasking orchestration, data access integrity, analytic workflow modernization. Could you provide a progress report on the modernization of GEOINT support for foundational military intelligence, that core platform we've been talking about for joint all-domain operations?
Sure. What I think I'll do is just kind of building off what's been said is talk a little bit about at the implementation level how that becomes real, because JADC2 isn't an output that goes into a thing. It's changing your operating model even inside your architecture, and I think that's what Dan and others have been referring to. So at NGA, I'll speak to targeting, but really this applies to any use case of how we need to change our work for the future. So it starts with data ingest, and we've got all these fantastic new opportunities that we've been talking about, commercial, national, airborne, and others. And we haven't talked about it enough, but the data access and integrity piece is foundational to this, and that's at ingest. Knowing that what we're getting is secure, having that tagged properly, and then hosting that in a way that all these people that need to get it, people and machines, can access it, access only the information they need. The machine could read it via APIs. That's a huge part of what we're doing on step one, getting out of a system, connecting to a system, connecting to a system, and going to store the data once, access it many, and know that it's going to be guarded. That's huge. So then you go to these accesses, and the example I'll give on targeting might be 3 concurrent accesses. One, where the same data is flowing down to our foundational GEOINT to build those 3D terrain models, right? It all can contribute, but the starting point of that is standards, right? If we apply the right standards to what it means to be a 3D quality product and build that database, then everyone can use it. Everyone can program and design their future combat system knowing that I'm going to consume this format. It's huge. It allows you to go exponential. So there's a threat on the foundational. The next one would be what I talked about, the machine to machine. So these same pixels, you heard Josh talk about needing pixels turned to dots at machine speed going to the JSF, right? So again, that will be driven by good standards about what do we call a detection? How is it classified? What's the error? How do we characterize the error with that? Having the X, Y, and Z component clearly delineated, again, it's an exponential enabler to many people. I could give a dot that me, NGA, our analysts would say that's a 45% confidence. I'm not letting that go. The Air Force person over the horizon goes, I'll take 45, that's better than 0, right? And I'll let my machine work it. So there's that machine piece. And then in the middle, there's our analysts. They're gonna consume both of these. They're gonna consume the pixel, they're gonna consume the terrain, and they're gonna consume the dots. And they're gonna bring that together to produce their targeting product, right? That will have a high degree of accuracy and precision. But there's also this second role that we've been talking about, and that is the human on the loop and the feedback. That human insight could say, you know that algorithm? It was good. I think I know how to take it from 45% accurate to 75% accurate, right? So this is the big vibe that we're excited about. It's changing the nature of work so that humans can do what humans do really well, which is reason and logic and feedback to the machine. And all that will be a continuous iteration enabled by an architecture that has the flexibility to consume multiple systems and data in multiple iterations in a very cyclical loop.
That's great. Thank you. One of the cards I got was not a question, it was a notification that our time has been slightly shaved to accommodate the special guest speaker who's coming on right after us. With that in mind, I think we have about 6 minutes left. Lauren, the Air Force has been very influential in the IC and across DoD, but also for industry with path-breaking efforts like Kessel Run. And so one of the audience questions that's kind of an obvious lead into, how do we make JADC2 more understandable to the app developers currently supporting defense missions?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're pushing hard right now is getting max adoption of Platform One. And not even Platform One as it is today, but Platform One as a comprehensive set of services that people use to drive mission value. And so if there's a service that a developer needs that it's not there today, instead of us doing what we've done in the past and just building a whole tech stack so that we can bring in this one service that isn't missing, that isn't there, let's do it together. Let's work as an inner source, open source community. And we are trying to build that community through Platform One. And I expect we'll be pushing that harder and harder within the Department of Defense and having more folks adopt it. But I mean, really, I would say just, stay close with us, continue to partner with us through Kessel Run, through Platform One, with the other services as well. We are converging. And we have a long way to go with software. We've had some real success in pockets. So, I think really that's kind of the best way to do it. And we're publishing a lot and speaking a lot too. So, I think the message is getting out there more and more.
That's great. Kelly, there's sometimes skepticism in the press because the Department of Defense has many, many networks. And there's a profusion of networks across each of the services as well, much less across DoD. The Navy has hundreds of, if you count up SAPs and everything else, of individual networks, most of which are going to be critical for warfighting in a JADC2 construct. And a question from the audience, the vision for JADC2 assumes that our networks are operational, but in any reasonable conflict, isn't that an unreasonable assumption? I can't think of a better person to ask that than the head of the Digital Warfare Office.
Awesome. So, I mean, that is definitely, as you think about the Navy being forward, having very constrained bandwidth, what we talk about is having primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency paths to get data. But also modernizing so that we have software-defined radios, and we are not so locked in from the standpoint of really having to hard code engineer between JSF and the system we're trying to connect to. And it can be more like our iPhones, where it's seamless that you're moving across a cell phone tower, or you're moving, through a different Wi-Fi network. We have to get to that modernized place of our software-defined networks. And leveraging a diversity of networks is really how we think of it. We need the resiliency. We need to have the pipes available to us when it is necessary. But I would say there's work being done at the deck plates to better connect our systems. We're working really closely with the Army and with the Air Force to embrace interoperability as more of a forethought than it has been a second thought. So I think it is okay to have many networks out there as long as the data can move across them seamlessly. In fact, there's benefit in having many networks available because it provides options as we go into contested environments.
Absolutely, great point. We have a question from the audience. I'm going to pose it to Dan. I'll read the question. How can and should we leverage Vice Admiral Sharp's role as the IC-DoD GEOINT functional manager to better align JADC2 activity across services and other stakeholders? And let me reframe it slightly for the congressional staffer who wrote this. From an industry perspective, there's always an interest and an expectation in clarity and transparency for what you would like to hear from your government partners and customers as you work together for something as complicated as JADC2. So from a vision and strategy and timelines perspective, what is it that you'd like to hear from the department and the IC on JADC2 that would help you partner better?
And as you ask that question, I'm looking right at Vice Admiral Sharp here, who we're very privileged to have a long and productive relationship and partnership and history with. So I would commend the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency and his leadership really in setting that clear objective about where they want to head. Because if you can show us that roadmap and you can talk about the capabilities you want and you can talk about why it's important, it allows us to make smart capital allocation decisions, invest our research and development technology dollars in ways that the government's not even paying for at that time, so that we can start to converge on where you want to go. And because we have an interest not only in having a successful business plan, but in our partnership in this ecosystem and the role we get to serve in the United States here. The one thing I would say is, and everybody will echo some version of this a little bit out in the audience, I'm sure, if you've worked with government before, but industry moves at a different speed than government does sometimes. When government is at a crisis, government can move at really, really fast, and they can build ships in a tenth of the time you thought you might be able to build them, those kind of things. But in a normal situation, sometimes there are lots of studies, there are lots of different people in the chain that may not have the time constant that industry would want to be able to solve the problem. And if industry doesn't get what it wants in the time constant it has, industry gets, I'm a representative of industry, a little bit fickle sometimes. We're like, well, if that's not going to happen on the timeline we thought it would, let's take those R&D dollars, let's put them on something that might generate a higher return or a better product for another customer. And so I think the contractual reforms that have been happening, the senior leadership, and all up and down the chain to really start to move things more quickly is really important. And those can be not just a program, but a technology development, the IRAD capabilities, the CRAD capabilities, whatever it is you're doing there, and get them through the system fast enough so that we can test to see whether it works. And if the solution doesn't work, that's fine, you shouldn't pay for it, right? But if the solution works and it's what you wanted, then that's when now you've got a customer and a partner relationship going. So speed is speed kills. Speed kills ideas, speed kills technology problems if it's not deployed in a way that industry would work on.
Great point, undeniable. I'm being told this is our final question. And so I'm going to ask you, Mark. First off, do the same thing. So this is a good audience question, but I'll reformulate it slightly. What does the commercial satellite industry need to do to support JADC2? Now that's the question. You just heard an industry perspective of what industry would like to see from its government partner. We heard Director Scalise talk about relationships of the NRO and the GEOINT community with industry. What would you like to see from all of these industry partners in their internal R&D, their IRAD, as they invest their own efforts in making that future Dan was just talking about?
Yeah, there's a couple of dimensions to it. You know, I hope that everyone has gotten a clear message on what Admiral Sharp values in terms of those 4 mission imperatives. That's where our investments are going, against those 4 lines of effort. And you referenced this great document put together by our CTO that talks about the tech focus areas. So that gives you a level deeper on where we're going to spend our money, and it gives you people to talk to if you don't see that manifesting itself in our contracts. So this is it. This is where we're going from a technology and a capability perspective. But there's another area I think we can continue to do better in partnering with industry, and that's harnessing your knowledge to do these important things like establish that standard for pixel products, for data tagging, for detections, right? Like I said, if we get that right, and you know it, you're able to accelerate and deliver. Everyone is, absolutely, right? It removes a barrier that may be limiting, right? So I think in that standards definition, I talked about architecture. There's also, we're trying to be a little more participant in how we develop this architecture. Alex put out an RFI on the software way, and we've gotten great feedback. So I think there's something we both need to do, and that's just collaborate more.
That's great. I want to thank each of you. I think for maybe a couple of people in the audience, this was probably the first time they've ever heard JADC2, and they could not have had it better explained and explored than from this group. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists.
All right.